This is 2013's Palo Alto. Warning, spoilers ahead. We open up to a car in an empty parking lot, and Teddy and Fred sit and contemplate life decisions while smoking and drinking. Teddy tries to say that he'll go back in time to be royalty or something, but Fred doesn't think that he'd be any better than a peasant. It's clear that they have nothing much better to do than act stupid as Fred drives the car right into the wall. Fred's pumped up after that too. It takes a special kind of idiot to have nothing better to do than drink and drive into walls. That probably made his whole weekend too. The next day, we meet April as she smokes a cigarette by the fence of her school. Mr. B calls her back over to practice soccer, and they get started with stretches. All of the girls sit around and talk about how much they want to get with Mr. B, but they all know that he only has a thing for April. April thinks it's too awkward though since she babysits his kids, but she can't help but get in on the conversation. Just then, Mr. B calls April over to see if she can babysit his son, and he tells her that he thinks his dates are absolutely stupid. After she agrees, he tells her that she should be the striker on the team since she looks so good on the field. He gives her a friendly little arm pat, and they go their separate ways. Then we cut to Fred and Teddy as they do some more delinquent crap, and I'm really starting to wonder what else they do with their lives. Is this all they do? It's not even anything super bad. It's just annoying delinquent stuff. Smoking, littering, driving into a wall, stupid stuff. As they leave the parking lot, they talk about more hypothetical situations, and it's clear that Fred is way too involved in his own head. Luckily for them, Teddy decides to drive this time. Meanwhile, April gets home to find Stuart in his office, and he tells her that he corrected her paper for her. She's a little peeved that he didn't just give her notes on the paper, but he points out that the paper needed a lot more work than she originally thought. After that, she heads upstairs to tell her mother Jane that she's tired and going to lay down, but Jane points out that she looks tired. Don't you love parents or partners who state the obvious even after you just said the same thing? Yeah, I know I'm tired, I just told you I'm tired. Thank you for confirming everything I thought and said already. Afterwards, April heads to her room to enjoy a bit of expressive freedom as she practices her reactions in the mirror. She's trying to be rebellious, but it just doesn't come across that way. Later, she goes into Jane's room to work on some homework, and Jane simply tells her that she needs to relax. That night, April heads to a party where everyone's playing Never Have I Ever, and Chrissy and Shauna are targeting each other in the game. April tries to enjoy the alcohol in peace as she wanders the house, and Teddy seems to be doing the same. Eventually, April finds Freddie and Teddy outside, and she heads over to sit with Teddy. They enjoy the awkward silence for a bit until Teddy mentions that they should go to the graves instead. Fred steals a lampshade and they run over to the local cemetery. This movie seems to do a good job in showing just how stupid the stupidest of this generation can be. It randomly clips to these guys strapping fireworks to their skateboard and trying to ride it around. In the cemetery, the three of them sit and talk about what they would do if they were to end things themselves, and it's clear that they're all of a different mindset. When they get back to the party, April is pulled away by Shauna, and Teddy watches her as she disappears on him. Fred wastes no time before going back in on the festivities, and Teddy isn't far behind him now that they're in the crazy mix. After a lot of drinking, Teddy goes outside to throw up, and he ends up getting escorted upstairs by one of the girls. April watches him go upstairs, and she drinks up the rest of her drink. She asks the guy hitting on her if he wants to do more shots, and of course he doesn't say no. This movie isn't what I was expecting from what I read. I thought there was going to be a lot more weird stuff with Mr. B, but instead, I'm sitting here watching a bunch of idiot teenagers make terrible life decisions. This is coming of age done wrong. After Teddy gets pleasured upstairs, he comes downstairs to find April getting a little bit of her own, and he grabs Fred to leave. Teddy ends up hitting a car after they leave, and Teddy decides to run instead of checking on the other car. Fred has him stop to let him out a little further down the road, and Teddy keeps going on his own. When he gets home, the police pull up right behind him. That's the fastest response time I've ever seen. They don't respond to anything that quickly. This cop got the call, picked up the woman, and managed to get to Teddy's house at the same time he did. Teddy refuses to cooperate with the officer, and he ends up getting arrested. In the morning, April wakes up in bed with some other girls, and she comes downstairs to find the absolute wreck that was left from the party. Later, they sit out back, and Chrissy tells Shauna about how Emily did a little something with Teddy in her parents' bedroom last night. That night, April goes to babysit Michael, and she puts on a movie that's definitely not age-appropriate. Needless to say, Michael's in love with the movie, but April thinks that it's time for bed. Later, Mr. B gets home, and he sits with April on the couch. He tells her that the date was crappy, and he seems to get a little creepy with her before she decides to leave. The next day, Teddy waits for his trial with his mother, and they eventually get called back. The judge tells him that since this is the second time in court, he's getting one final chance. What was the first event? Was it the driving into the wall moment? All he had to do is 12 months of probation, community service, and apologize to the woman he hit. That's nothing. When they get home, Teddy apologizes to his mom for everything, and she tells him not to hang out with Fred anymore. Later at school, the girls talk about whether Fred is cute or not, and he proves that he's an acquired taste for certain people. The guys can't stand being around him either, so Fred decides to try and hit on the girls watching him. One of the girls decides that she can't stand being around Fred, but Emily stays behind to have her moment with him. She invites him over to her place, and he gets the first-hand tour of her bedroom. I can't stand Fred. Fred is one of those guys that everyone knew, but they never really wanted to be associated with him. The two of them end up sleeping together, but once they're done, Fred simply says it was fun and leaves. That evening, Teddy goes to his art class, but it's definitely not his style of company. As time goes on, Teddy and April seem to be mutually miserable, and there's nothing that they can seem to do to change it. One day, April sits in her locker to eat, and Mr. B finds her. He checks in on her since she's been missing out on practice, and she assures him that she was just behind on homework. At the same time, Teddy goes to apologize to the woman he hit, and she seems to be way more understanding than expected. Later, he heads to the library to do his community service, and he's extremely unimpressed with where his life is right now. After some time exploring the library, he ends up realizing that he actually enjoys his time here, and the librarian tells him that he can always come back once his community service is over. He got lucky with getting a library for community service. So who decides to show up to screw it up? Fred. Because things had actually been going pretty well for too long. At least Teddy can stick to his guns and tell Fred he won't be hanging out with him. Teddy goes back into the library, and he tries to text April. He doesn't know that she's at Mr. B's place getting extra tutoring, and April is getting that extra attention. Extra as in Mr. B swoops in for that kiss, and April doesn't seem to mind at all. They admit that they really like each other, and April seems to be falling down a rabbit hole she never expected. Later, Teddy sits bored in an office as he waits for an answer, and he winds up daydreaming about being dressed as a wild thing from where the wild things are. I'm not sure if this is purely daydreaming or if he actually dressed up like that one time while smoking with Fred. Well, it turns out that Fred screwed things up for him again thanks to his visit, and now Teddy will be doing his hours somewhere else. That night, Teddy heads to Fred's house to have a serious conversation, but he ends up sitting with his dad instead. Fred's dad is extremely high, and he offers a bit to Teddy to be nice. Teddy decides to go against his court order, and he takes a hit off the joint. Fred's dad decides to get a little more friendly with him, and he sits next to him on the couch. When things get even weirder, Teddy decides just to leave, and he goes to find Fred on his own. Teddy has Fred bring a chainsaw to the park where they plan on cutting down one of the trees that April carved a heart in. Little extreme. The next day, Teddy starts his community service at the nursing home, and Fred heads to Emily's house to take Emily to another friend's house. This gets out of hand. He ends up having a bunch of guys run a train, and he keeps coming back for more on his own. Then he starts playing with her emotions when he tells her to say that she loves him. Man, Fred's the villain in everyone's story. The next day, Teddy and April run into each other at school, and things are a little awkward. They cut their conversation short, and April heads to soccer practice. Mr. B doesn't seem to be showing April the same attention anymore, and she feels like something is wrong. She walks off the field, and later, she goes to Mr. B's place for some more special tutoring. He offers her a beer, but she's not interested. April asks him why he's been treating her differently at school, and he tells her that the reason is obvious. He admits that he loves her, and this throws her for a loop. She packs up and tries to leave, but Mr. B won't let her go. He admits that he wants to be with her, but now she thinks that she should hang out with guys her own age. Once again, they're past the point of no return. You can't go back from here. They'll never go back to the old student-teacher relationship, and things are too awkward to keep some sort of a relationship going. The next day at school, April gets pulled aside by a teacher, and she gets accused of cheating on her paper. April is just overwhelmed by everything, and she cries in the bathroom while the other girls bicker about normal slutty high school girl topics. That night, Fred goes with Teddy to his art class, and it's clear that this is not his area of expertise. The next day, Teddy goes to do more of his community service, and his art gets noticed by one of the residents. She sits him down to talk about his art, and the conversation turns towards trusting his talent. That night, April shows up to her soccer game, and they wind up losing horribly. One of the girls plays up her injury, but the other girls notice that she's only doing it to get extra attention from Mr. B. April should be done with this team. Go run track or something. She gets a ride from Mr. B after the game, and they wind up going back to her place. How do her parents have no idea what's going on with her? And why would she want to go back there? They sit on the couch and immediately start making out. But things go a bit farther this time. In the morning, April takes a moment to think about what happened the night before, and she comes downstairs to get a drink. Jane asks if she wants some breakfast, and April is actually surprised to get the affection and attention. Later, she babysits Michael, and she smokes while he plays Mortal Kombat. Michael tells her that she's not allowed to do that, and their relationship seems much more strained than usual. Then she finds out that Raquel babysits him from time to time, and April is furious. Later, Mr. B tries to call and explain what happened with Raquel, and he tries to blame it on her leaving him the other night. April refuses to come over anymore, though. I don't see that lasting very long. Also, did you ever think that you might even feel a little bit sad for Fred? Yeah, me neither, but that night at a party, Emily starts giving him the cold shoulder, and he genuinely seems like he likes her now. I could be wrong, though. The two of them eventually sneak next door to go swimming, but Emily keeps denying him. Back at the party, April and Teddy find their way to each other outside, and they catch up quietly. Eventually, Teddy calls her out for not caring about anything, but she points out that it's actually the complete opposite. Then she calls him out for the same thing, and he tells her that he actually cares about her actually. In fact, he goes a step further and tells her that he loves her. April talks about the tree that she carved a heart in, and Teddy tells her about how he and Fred cut it down. Speaking of Fred, Emily is calling him out for his crap, and now I don't feel sorry for him at all. I'm actually not a fan of either one of them, honestly. Emily deserves better, but it's a touchy situation. Fred goes back to the party to find Teddy, but Teddy and April left to skate in a parking lot. April gets down to her lucky cigarette, and Teddy asks her what she's going to wish for. Suddenly, Fred shows up, and he tells Teddy to get in the car to get some weed. April asks him to call her tomorrow, and Fred pulls Teddy to the car. In the car, Fred asks Teddy for more hypothetical questions again, but things get out of hand when Fred reveals a knife. Eventually, they get to Skull to buy some weed, but Skull gets a little nervous when Fred pulls out the knife. Fred ends up breaking down when it's revealed that he's actually gay, but the pressure of holding to standards is crashing down on him. They leave Skull intact, and Fred gives Teddy a ride. I can't tell if there's going to be a happy ending for anyone in this story. It's starting to feel like a real tragedy. While driving, Fred throws out the idea of driving on the wrong side of the road, but Teddy points out that it's hard for him to hang out with him when he acts like this. Back at her house, April takes out her last cigarette and makes a wish before lighting it. Just then, Teddy asks Fred to pull over, and he gets out of the car. Fred continues on his own. April texts Teddy, and he smiles when he checks his phone. Meanwhile, Fred drives down on the wrong side of the highway as Teddy walks the right way home. Then the credits roll. Okay, you all know that I usually find a reason to give a movie a shot, but honestly, I don't have one for this one. We've definitely seen worse, but I did feel like I just wasted my time. Solid acting, but the story was all over the place and absolutely pointless. Give it a shot if you want to, but you're not missing anything out by not watching it. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more like this one. Comment what you think I should watch next, and I'll see you in the next video.